All right, let's go ahead and discuss a couple of these. You're going to share them, and then let the rest of the class guess. Maddie, what do you got?
Do I just say like
Just give me the two variables.
Okay. Food and hunger.
Food and hunger. All right, so is that a positive correlation or negative correlation, spurious correlation? What we got, Miss Bear? You want to guess again? It'd be a negative, right? The more food that you have, we're going to assume that your level of hunger is going to go down, so the arrows are headed in opposite directions, right? Miss Sarah, what do you have?
Absences and grades.
Absences and grades, okay? So what kind of correlation is that? Miss Carson's?
Negative.
It is a negative, right? The more absences that you have, your GPA and your grades are going to go down, opposite directions. All right, that's a good one. Miss Dill. Job and raise. All right, so what would that be? Maybe job and money, job and raise, yeah? Yes, Mr. Patrick.
Positive.
It's positive, both head in the same direction, right? Got a job, raise is gonna more likely your money's gonna go up. Don't have a job, you're not gonna have a raise, or your money's gonna go decrease there. Okay, Ms. Blakes.
Ear length and income.
Hair length and income.
Ear length.
Ear length, not hair length. Ear length, like top to bottom vertically. Yep, and income. All right. So what is this, Austin?
Spurious.
A spurious correlation. Did you find that online? You just made that up. Okay. So some of the ones that you find online, what they do is they have this third variable, right? That really contributes to both of them. We just, we got to figure it out. Did anybody look those up? Find one spurious correlation online? No. Okay. Let's get one more example. Doesn't have to be a spurious correlation. Miss Felicity.
Alcohol consumption and sobriety.
Alcohol consumption and sobriety. Okay. So that would be what, Miss Patrick?
Negative.
That's negative correlation. Going up, going down, opposite directions there. Okay. Arrows head in the same direction, positive correlation. Arrows head in the opposite direction, negative correlation. Very good. Anybody have any questions about that? No. All right. Let's go ahead and put that off to the side. We're going to do a couple things. Let's do one thing first. I went to do this on Tuesday, early in the week. Forgot all about it. So on one of your handouts that you picked up, maybe the one with the ethical guidelines, you got some space, extra space on it. You may want to write these down. When you're doing sociological research, you got some challenges, some difficulties. So we need to discuss these 5. There may be a test question associated with them. I'm assuming you don't have a copy of it. Did I run out of copies? I did. That's a bummer. You may have to use this sheet of notebook paper. Well, I think I may have extra one. For the ethics one, you may have to look off at somebody next to you, and I may have to make another copy for you in a little bit, okay? All right. Apologize about that. Anybody else missing that one? No? Okay. All right. 5 difficulties in sociological research. First one is the Hawthorne effect, okay? And it's a challenge for researchers because of the Hawthorne effect. What is the Hawthorne effect? It's based off this guy named Hawthorne. He was doing some research at a factory, and he was monitoring worker output, right? Worker productivity. And so what he did, he was most concerned about like lighting. He thought that if he could isolate the variable of lighting, and he could see how much it affects worker output. So he goes to the factory environment, and he measures worker output as the baseline, right? And he goes back and he changes the lighting. He increases it, improves the lighting, makes it better. And then he observes and measures the worker output. And what happens to worker output? It increases. gets better, right? So he goes back again, makes even more improvements on the lighting, right? Measures worker output. What happens to worker output? Goes up again. He thinks, man, I'm onto something here, right? He goes back one more time, and this time he makes the lighting even worse than it was at the very beginning, right? Dims everything down, okay? Measures worker output again, and what does he find? It goes up again, right? It's like, what in the world? Worker output keeps going up. And so the assumptions that he made, the conclusions that he made was it wasn't the lighting at all, but what was it that was making increase in worker output?
The fact that it changed.
The fact that it changed, the change in the environment, close. Mr. Patrick?
There was somebody there studying them.
Exactly. The presence of the researcher, right? The presence of the researcher affected worker output more than they could see him being there. Whenever he'd show up, it kind of changes our behavior a little bit. The attention that we get increases our behavior. So that's the problem with sociological research. It's difficult for you to do research without being notified, all right, or identified. Number two, I think we mentioned this the other day, people are not lab rats, especially yesterday. You can do some experiments on lab rats, but then it becomes unethical when you try to apply that to people. So that's a challenge. Number three, origins of behavior are complex. So, there are so many different variables in it, and sociologists try to come up with the perfect scenario to try to isolate particular variables to see how much it matters or how much of a difference it makes on the outcome of one person's life. But a lot of times, trying to narrow down those variables and come up with those perfect experiments or perfect, I don't want to use the word experiment there, research, that's a challenge, right? Number four, ethical dilemmas. Say, for example, Sudhir Venkatesh, right? With the research that he's doing, he becomes aware of like this crack dealing scenario, right? They're dealing drugs. Isn't that kind of unethical that he knows the people that are actually dealing drugs? Doesn't he have an obligation to turn that information over to the police or to the authorities there? So that creates some questions. And then number five, sociology is part of the subject studied. So objectivity and bias. I'm going to write bias out to the side here. Because you become a part of the subject that you're studying or the community that you're studying, especially with an ethnography, sometimes you get too close to develop relationships, emotions get involved, and there goes your research, right? The quality of your research is skewed, so you got to be careful with that. All right, so keep those in mind. We may have some assessment questions on Tuesday pertaining to that. I do want to remind you, on Tuesday with the test, we'll review Monday, then have tests. In order for you to be able to take the test, you have to have 0 incomplete assignments. So I know that we've done a pretty good job, but there's about 4 or 5 assignments lingering out there. Most of them are discussion posts, so you need to make sure that you check on that. Make sure you got all of your assignments taken care of. If that happens to be the case, you come into class and there's an incomplete there, then you will get a 0 on the assessment, right? So you don't want that to happen. Then you'll get a 0 on all of your other incomplete assignments there as well. So make sure that you've got all that taken care of prior to Tuesday. All right, let's look at the list, the 8, right? Since I gave all of them out. Over here. All right, what we're going to do is familiarize yourself with 8 ethical guidelines that's common in research, and then we're going to see if we can get some practice in with them. Okay, let's go through each one of them. This is common to not only, sociological research, but also psychological research and other research in other subject fields, okay, or subject areas. The American Sociological Association does have a more complex list of guidelines, but these are some just common guidelines. Everybody got that? That I want you to familiarize yourself with. Number 1, informed consent. Subject participants of research must be informed that they are included in the form of research. However, participants do not necessarily have to be notified of content in research. Say, for example, I want to study aggressive behavior in preschool children. Does that mean I need to go to every 3, 4-year-old and tell them, hey, you're going to be a part of this research? Is that all right? That's not going to happen. Maybe you have a letter that goes to their parents, right, to satisfy that consent. Number 2, deception can only be used when the researcher believes knowledge of the research content will lead to altered behavior or the Hawthorne effect. So you can use deception. You can lie to your subjects in your research. You can lie to them. All right. However, you need to debrief them. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But you can only lie to them, not just for kicks and giggles. You have to have a reason, right? You have to have, this expectation that their behavior will be skewed because of their knowledge of what is going on. Number 3, payment cannot be excessive. I think it says extensive. But excessive pay can skew participant behavior. Imagine if I wanted you to be a participant in my research, and I told you, I'll give you $1 million if you do my research. That would skew your behavior, and motivation would definitely change. Number 4, debriefing. At the conclusion of the experiment, researchers must inform participants of the research results. There's this guy named John B. Watson. He's a behavioral psychologist, more of social psychology. And he does research on a guy named Little Albert, or a little boy named Little Albert. And he conditioned him to be afraid of rats, white rats. Okay, now that's not too eye-opening. Most of us are scared of rats. But the idea here was generalization took place. What does generalization mean? It's the characteristic associated with a rat that was generalized to other variables. Like, other things that were white, little Albert became fearful of. Things that were white that you shouldn't be fearful of, Albert became afraid of those things. Okay? Now the plan was Watson was going to recondition him, make the behavior be extinct, but he didn't have an opportunity to do that. He allowed little Albert to go away before the research was concluded. So you got to assume that little Albert had some issues, right? Some psychological issues. As a result of being a part of the research, debriefing did not take place. So you need to debrief, right? You need to inform the participants. What was the purpose of the research? What are the results of the research, right? Number 5, use of subordinates. They cannot be used as subject in research. So a teacher cannot, a teacher could skew the results of research by holding a grade over the head of the student participant. So I can't use you or any of my students as participants in studies. Legality, you can't violate the law, like we talked about yesterday. Institutionally approved, if I wanted to do something here at the school district, not necessarily using my students, but some other students here at the school district, I'd have to have the approval of the administration and the school board. Publication, after you finish your research, you are required to publish your results, even if you don't get what you want to get out of the research, right? Even if it disproves your theory. You need to publish it in a journal so that other professionals can take a look at your research and they can work off of your research. Maybe they don't agree with your theories and your results of your research, and so they want to challenge you. So what do? They try to replicate your research and see if they get the same results, right? And that's how we would grow as a profession, to be able to balance ideas or bounce ideas off of one another. Sound good? All right, so you're going to get a moment here. Flip it over to the other side. Now, not all of these are applicable, but a lot of them are. What you're going to do is you're going to read through this list of experiments or different examples of research, and you are going to try to figure out, first off, is there anything unethical about it, right? If there is something unethical about it, are there any of the 8 ethical guidelines that are specifically being violated there? Sound good? You're going to work with your partner for a few moments and do this together, and then we'll get back together and discuss it. Sound good? All right, you guys get after it. All right, let's discuss a few of these. Barry, do you mind if I take over again? Now again, not all of these are going to be easy to match up with our 8 ethical guidelines, but I think you get a feel for whether they're unethical or not. So the first one, sociology instructor asks his students in the introductory class complete questionnaires that the instructor will analyze and use in preparing a journal article for publication. Ms. Argo, what's wrong with that one? Exactly, subordinates. Number 2, or letter B, after a field study of deviant behavior during a riot, law enforcement officials demanded that the researcher identify those persons who were observed looting rather than risk arrest as an accomplice. After the fact, the researcher complies. Okay? Now, initially, I thought that this one would be, unethical because he gave out information. Like, what about confidentiality issues? Okay? But if you look at the handout on Sudhir Venkatesh stuff that I gave you earlier in the second paragraph on the back side, it says, there was no such thing as a researcher-client confidentiality akin to the privilege conferred upon lawyers, doctors, and priests. This meant that if I, Sudhir here doing the research, were ever subpoenaed to testify against the gang, I would be legally obligated to participate. If I withheld information, I could be cited for contempt. While some states offer so-called shield laws that allow journalists to protect their confidential sources, no such protection exists for academic researchers. So in this particular case, if he didn't comply to the authorities, he'd get in trouble, right? So, was that? That's dumb. So you are not exempt from confidentiality situations as a sociologist, okay? Letter C. After completing the final draft of the book reporting the research project, the author discovers that 25 of the 2,000 survey interviews were falsified by interviewers, but chooses to ignore the fact and publish the book anyway. Is this ethical or unethical?
Unethical.
It's unethical. Does it fit with any of the list of the 8? Not necessarily. Okay, but we can feel they have a component in the American Sociological Association guidelines of integrity. Like, you got to do what is right, right? Even though nobody else may know, you got to do what is right, and so that would be a violation of that integrity code. PhD candidate gains access to an underground mine as a researcher employee by telling management that he has a BA degree and wants to get some practical experience before going on for a degree in metallic engineering. He's very familiar with the mining work. Is this unethical or ethical, Mr. Patrick?
Unethical.
You want to guess again? Why would it be unethical?
I mean, he's like lying to me.
He is. But can you lie as a researcher?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, you can lie, you can use deception, because from his point, if they knew that he was a researcher, what would happen to their behavior? It would change, right? So he's being deceitful, that's fine here in this particular case. He is, the only time it wouldn't be in this particular, if he was like a danger to the people around him. But he's familiar with that type of atmosphere. So it's not like he's going to be a safety concern there, okay? Letter E, a college instructor wants to test the effect of unfair grading of exam performance. She administered exam to both sections of the course. What's wrong with this one, Ms. Carsons?
She didn't tell her students.
So, more than not telling her students, you can use deception again. Deception is fine. Ms. Benton?
She can't use her own students.
You can't use your own students, right? You can hang grades over their head that way. Letter F, a researcher discovers that 85% of students smoke marijuana regularly at school. Publication of this finding will probably create a furor in the community because no extensive analysis of drug use is planned. The researcher decided to ignore the finding. Keep it quiet. Mr. Rosinski?
Publication.
Exactly. You got to publish your results. Let's see here. To test the extent of which people may try to save face by expressing attitudes of matters they are wholly uninformed about, the researcher asks for their attitudes regarding a fictitious issue. Is this ethical or unethical, Ms. Bikes? It's ethical. You can use deception, right? Let's do one more. Research questionnaire is circulated among students, part of the university registration packet. Although students are not told they must complete the questionnaire, the hope is that they will believe that they must, thereby ensuring a higher completion rate. Done? There's one aspect that you could probably fit this one under. What would that be? Anybody figure this one out? Ms. Baird? Ms. Sarah? Yep, informed consent. Informed consent. Okay. Sometimes what happens, you'll notice this every once in a while. Like when you sign up to go through an registration process, like at college, or if you sign up for the military, what they'll do is they'll have this ton of paperwork that they'll overwhelm you with, like the first couple days, right? And you're just, it's like document. Sign my name, okay, And some of those documents are like participate in surveys and stuff like that. So sometimes you don't actually consciously aware of it because it's thrown at you so fast. And then you sign a document that says that you're willing to participate in survey research that way. Sound good? It happens all the time. All right, let's go ahead and change modes. I'm going to give you some time. That's it really for our content for the first unit of the study. The last thing that I'm going to give you is this article titled Sex in the Society. And it's one last attempt to help you to think from the sociological imagination. Think about how the social forces around us influence us into making personal decisions, affect our personal decisions that we make. Okay? So the article, the summary of it, it's about what happens in society if you have a whole bunch of males and not very many females, right? You have an influx, that sex ratio is off. Or what happens whenever you have a whole bunch of females and not as many males, okay? What are the social consequences of that? The social structure has changed. Social dynamics has changed. What does that do to people's decisions and their perceptions of others? Yeah?
Isn't there a certain country where women are allowed to marry more than one man
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I think so because of the fact that
It's so off balance? Interesting. I haven't heard of that. That'd be, you have an idea of what country that is?
I don't know. I just
Oh yeah, it's illegal here. Yep. Polygamy is outlawed here in the United States.
in another country.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see that. Yeah. I'll have to look that up. All right, so some interesting stuff here. There will be some test questions pertaining to this. There are some reflective questions on the back for you to consider after you finish reading. Sound good? Ms. Argo?
I didn't get
Nope. Anybody else? You? And you? All right, I'll see if I can find a couple more copies. I think I have a few. I'll get you just a second. I might have to make a copy. All right, you guys can go ahead and start reading. I'll be back in just a second. Okay? Take back. Ms. Ains?